welcome to the Collingwood Rant. It's round 18, I think. I keep getting it wrong. I'm Sly.
And I'm the pebble still hasn't hit the bottom of this hole, Spook.
Spook,
Yes.
did you see any of the factors that contributed to our loss occurring going to this game against league
Going into
leader?
the game, did you say?
I don't know anymore. Yeah, going into the game, did you think that there would be a disconnect between the midfield and the forward line?
An expectation, or did I think it?
Oh, did you think that might happen?
Well,
Did you?
nothing's. I mean,
Did
this
you?
this could be the whole. This could be one of those episodes, like a clips episode. We could probably not even talk and just go back and play clips from previous episodes. That'd suffice, wouldn't it?
Did you think that Grundy might tap it more to advantage of his opponents? I think he set up 3 goals for Port Adelaide.
Yeah.
If we could have gotten him in the Port Adelaide jumper, he might have finally hit a Collingwood player with a tap.
Maybe we could have just claimed he was trolling the prison bar jumper.
Well, that was the other thing I was going to say. I don't know. My eyes are getting old. Were Port wearing their grey away jumper? Or were they wearing their black and white prison jumper? Because I have to imagine they were wearing the black and white prison jumper because that would be the only explanation for the amount of times we hit them with kicks. Let me put this to you. Is it still an intercept mark when you fucking target the opponent? How can it be an intercept mark? You passed it directly to him.
I got a feel for Houston. I think at one stage he almost looked like he was going to break out in a sweat.
Oh, jeez. I am sick of watching the breakdown in system, and then you get other people blaming injuries and all that sort of shit. Your club is magnificently fucked. And anybody who thinks it's got anything to do with anything other than that system is, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to label you all deluded. We just have a game plan that has reverted to what it was in 2014 to 2017. You see the same insane chains of handballs. I know how much you love those handballs to players under pressure.
Oh, I can't get enough of them. I don't. I've got raw hands from clapping at the end of a game.
You see them just constantly handball back and back and back until
They're in
someone.
another. At one point, they were in a different stadium. They went that far back.
At some point you're loading the dice for failure because it's either someone's going to mess up the handball, you're going to handball to a guy about to get crunched, or my personal favorite is when the guy who finally gets just goes, fuck this, I'm just going to boot it blindly 40 meters. It's like maybe you should have done that 15 handballs ago before everyone else ran back to zone that off.
It's kind of obvious, isn't it?
And the one thing, I spoke to you about this when we were watching the game at that house party last night. You look at the go in that first half. The go is a gun. Okay, so there's no one is going to doubt his ability.
No.
He could not get anywhere near the ball in that first half.
That's because the ball couldn't get anywhere near him.
Yep. And people in the past have always put qualifications on our breakdown going forward. So they've blamed Cox and, whoever else we've had up there saying they're not good enough or they get pushed under the ball. The go is a gun. There's no reason he couldn't have won the ball if it was there on offer. It was never there on offer. And it just shows, I think that was emblematic of how poor our ball movement is going forward. And you know what? If this was the first time it had happened, I'd go, oh, well, shit, shit happens. I recall it happened a couple of times in 2010 when we were a really good side. But it's not. It's just week in, week out. And the scoreline really flattered us. Going into halftime, they were 5-3. We were 4 straight. I don't know when we've ever kicked 4 straight. That game could have been over if we'd probably kicked a little bit truer to, what we usually kick. And in the end, they've had 16, 17, 18 shots, and we've had 10. They could have... Well, it actually never felt like they were under threat. It always felt like they were fully in control of the game, even those couple of times we got in front. It just felt like they were just going to go up a gear and then we were going to capitulate. And the thing that annoys me is whenever we have a comeback and we look like we might get into it, the reason it happens is purely because manic intensity lifts for a little bit. It's not because the system improves or gels or whatever. It lifts for a little bit and then we force a few things. But obviously that's unsustainable. So I watched last night with probably the greatest apathy I've felt for a Collingwood football game since, I don't know, about 2005. And 2005, I had reason to be apathetic because I knew we were in a rebuild and we were bringing in all these young players and older guys were on the way out and we had a lot of injuries. I just could not believe how uninteresting a game it was. And as all those issues occurred, it was like I had a mental checklist to go, yep, there's those stupid handballs. There's that poor movement going forward. There's that terrible tap work going to no one. There is the complete absence. And let me put this to you and to our millions of listeners. One of my qualifications on being rated the good player is you can be a good player in a team that's played poorly. And I reckon there's too many times where I've seen this team play poorly, and there's only been a handful of guys who have stood out, like Pendlebury is an obvious one.
Mm-hmm.
There's too many players, and yesterday's a really good example. I'm going to get onto two guys who led the way in terms of what should be done. Yesterday, when that game needed some leadership and some initiative and proactivity, who did it come from? Isaac Quaynor, who's played about 9 games, and John Noble, who's played about 15 games.
And I also agree on that. Yeah.
Noble wasn't brilliant, but he was trying to get something started.
Yep.
And it's like, why are these two guys? Jack Crisp was, he puts the effort in, but geez, he was anonymous.
He taught manfully, I think, is the term you were looking for.
He taught shitfully, I think is the term I was looking for. Braden Maynard, I've noticed this year, seems to be falling further and further back in defence. So it's like opposition coaches have said, you've got to bring him back because we've got to stop that raking kick coming out of half-back. That's up to Buckley to fix, but we know it won't be fixed. And then you get guys like Varco and Josh Thomas and Hoskinode, even though Hoskinode did a couple little things, but you get guys like Thomas and Varco who, why are you playing him? Varco looked like he was finished 4 games ago. Sorry, Varco looked like he was finished last year.
Yep.
He's come into the preseason with a dislocated shoulder, whatever it is. He's really struggled throughout the whole season, and you've persevered with him. Josh Thomas has been terrible the whole year.
Yep.
Why not throw the opportunity to someone like Nathan Murphy? I've got to name him every week. Sharon Bird. Or one of the youngsters like Rantel or Bianco, or even go back to Rusco. Why not start pumping games into the future rather than wasting them on the past? Because these guys are not going to be part of our future. And it's ludicrous that we've persevered with both talent, using that word loosely, and systems that have failed us for 2 years. People who don't think this isn't happening in 2019 when we were calling it last year, sorry, I have to agree with what Spook said off air. You're all deluded. It's been going on for quite a while, and it's like the Titanic sailing into the iceberg and hoping that the iceberg might move out of the way. It's not going.
No. And it's sort of hard to sit here and just keep regurgitating the same stuff over and over again.
I can do it.
But at what point do you think this is draining? You've had enough. You want to start seeing some affirmative action in that space. Now, again, it's going to come down to where's the club seeing themselves at the moment? Do they see themselves with a need to go through a mini rebuild, or do they see themselves as a contender?
I think they see themselves as a contender, but look, I have to be fair. I actually think. Oh, sorry. Let me backtrack. You go to 2003, and we made a grand final, and then if you break that team down, you had guys like Logan and Walker and Kinnear and Jason Cloak and all these sort of guys in there who, when the bottom fell out, they really struggled. Jason Cloak was treated unfairly by Malthouse, who decided he was going to play a centre half forward. But when you look at the lead up to 2003, they all looked at the very least serviceable, because Malthouse gave them extremely defined roles and they filled those roles. Now, I reckon there's players within the current list who would be a lot better in a lot more structured side where they were given definitive roles. The guy I'll actually pull out is one of the more talented guys, is Treloar. Treloar, and I remember you texted me, Treloar kicked that fucking awesome goal in the first quarter. took the ball, broke through a couple of tackles, burned off the Port Adelaide opponents, and then snapped a goal. And it's like, well, hey, look what you can do when you take the game on. And then he was out there, but I did not notice him for the rest of the game. And you're not giving him a role which is exploiting his strengths, which should be his pace and, that line breaking. You're instead turning him into a dour in and under midfielder who's standing there at the coalface feeding out a shitty handball. And it's like, well, you could probably get Rupert Wills just to do that if that's what you want. Surely you should be looking at guys like Treloar. Crisp is another one. Crisp to me struggled this year. And again, I just think he's being used in different ways. Tom Phillips is another one. Jaden Stevens is another one. He's been thrown a half back and then round. It's like, well, none of this is working and you're persevering with it. So why can we not define what the roles of these players are? And I think you'd get an improved output from some of them. I mean, some of them just aren't going to be, times come or whatever the case is. It just feels like we've got these players and instead of playing to their strengths, you're playing to some redundant system which is completely diminishing their input. And it's all under the banner of brand, this is our brand or whatever. And it's just like, to me, it's just boring, unadventurous football that goes backwards and sideways and moves the ball slowly and rarely looks like it's ever going to challenge, it rarely looks like it's actually going to beat a good team. Often we'll stay in contests and all that, like we did against Port, but were we ever really going to win that? No. And it was just like, we'll stay within 2 to 5 goals of this and we'll come away with an honourable loss, air quotes. But it's not actually, nobody would be watching that game who finished in the finals thinking we fear Collingwood on that basis. What we're seeing.
No, and you say it's the same old stuff too, like the way that Port seemingly had about 98 blokes playing defensively when the ball came in, and then there was a Parkland ahead of them when they went on the rebound. It's that whole thing we keep saying about beat Collingwood 101, and everyone can get an A+ in it. It's a very simple structure to break down and counter, and we seem to want to do it every week. Virtually.
Yep. Yeah. And, you look at the stats, 42 hit outs to 27. So typically we won those. Yay. Clearances 28 to 40 in their favour. Centre clearances 4 to 14 in their favour.
Yeah, that's pretty poor.
It's beyond poor. And again, the issue is this has been happening pretty regularly. You're relying on Scott Pendlebury to still lead the way at 32. Where the fuck is the next generation of midfielders coming through? Why did you pay 2 pick 7s for Adam Treloar and turn him into really a vanilla midfielder? What exactly is the system that's going to lift Collingwood out of this? If you're just going to run around throwing, corporate speak at supporters and saying, oh, well, this isn't our brand and this is what I'm going to play and blah, blah, you're not going to fucking get anywhere because I think people are starting to recognise the rhetoric and identifying it as bullshit. I mean, you love that quote from Buckley, didn't you, about, we're either really close to Port or miles away from them, whatever the fuck it was.
What do you infer from that? Is there something... look, I'm a simple man at the end of the day. Am I supposed to infer something from that other than the fact that tomorrow it might rain, but then again it might not?
I don't know. I really
don't understand what that... There's nothing in that statement. It's just hollow. Anyway, you're having it each way. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
I don't know. I've given up watching a lot of the media press conferences and that. But I will say, whenever the hell the game played, watching that game when they're doing cuts to Buckley in the coach's box, I don't think I've ever seen him as baffled and defeated as he looked in this game.
Yeah, as I said to you during the broadcast last night, I'm sure they narratively picked their perfect shots to show some of that, but it's just consistently that blank expression. Now, I'm sure he must get animated and they just choose not to show that, but it's not a good look.
Well, I mean, I've seen him animated. I've seen him angry and laughing and all that sort of shit. This is honestly, and like I said, I don't really watch a lot of, when they're doing cutaways and all that sort of stuff. But he really looked to me the way Reece Shaw's looked at times this year, and the way Tony Shaw looked in '99, where they're just sort of cutting to him and they're looking at it like, I have no more fucking answers. I don't know why this is happening. I've imparted all my intelligence. I've tried everything I know to try, and it's still coming up like this, and I have nothing left. And he really looked to me like that in that game. He looked like and even that comment might have just been, almost declaration of resignation, just to say, fuck, I don't know where to go with this. I don't know if we're close or far or whatever.
Or resignation, there you're talking.
Well, okay, so let me throw this to you. So our supporters divided into two camps. People who think like us, that we're actually not that great. We need to go backwards a little bit, but we also need a major revamp, and that includes the coach. And then you get people who will look at that loss and say, well, we only lost by 16 points, whatever it was. We're not that far. We've had a tough year with injuries and other situations like the side bottom COVID thing. We're not that far off it. If we can just pick up that one missing ingredient, which is, I don't know, Richmond's list or something, then, we can turn it around and contend. So what do you think of that perspective?
Sorry, structure that question again.
This structure, talking about structure. All right. I was just saying that Collingwood supporters break into two camps. One camp is like us, who feel we need to change everything, coach and all that. And the other camp is still very supportive of Buckley and what we're doing, and just will cite qualifiers as to why it hasn't worked, like injuries and that. So what do you think of that camp?
Oh, that's the blind love stuff becomes borderline irrational. It's that whole clap them off no matter how much they've shat the bed mentality. It's like you're always there supporting, and that's the most important thing. Well, actually, it's not. It's not what the club's about. It's not what the players go out and do. Everyone wants to win inside of this game. It's what competitive sport's all about. Support and cheer and all that sort of stuff is fine. But when it gets to a point where you're a club, and let's just say we call them Collingwood, and they've won 2 flags in about 70 odd years, and they're not a great example of how to do things right when it comes to the pointy end of the season and winning grand finals, then maybe you've got to look at things pragmatically and say that everything's not right. Everything needs to be looked at, and everything, well, not everything, but certain things are going to need to be changed moving forward. You can't just sit there and say, booyah, the world's wonderful because I wear a Collingwood jumper to bed every night. It's not how it works anymore. There is rules and process within this sport that enables you to better your position by taking a bitter pill to swallow. And that just means that you're going to have to go down to get back up again. And sometimes you've just got to concede and accept that that's going to be the way to move forward. And I don't understand why this belief that just pushing forward and being there is enough. It's not good enough for me. I want to celebrate flags. I want my kids to know and support a football club that means something other than the fact that you've got a rabid supporter base. I want to be Hawthorn. I want to be Geelong of 15 years ago and have multiple flags under your belt. It's like in 10 when we won, and then we had that massively dominant season the following. Everyone just looked at each other and thought, well, this is just too good to be true, a dynasty. And then it just went back to form. And that's the worry that I have about following this club and moving forward in the future is that we're not learning from our mistakes and history keeps repeating.
What about people who counter or look at John Worsfold's exit speech at Essendon, where he talked about, there are no shortcuts and you got to stick the course. And then people who will point at Damien Hardwick and say, well, he was, coach for 28 years at Richmond before they finally turned into the powerhouse that they have. What do you feel about people who would use that as a defence to say, that's why we need to stick with Buckley? He's not far off. He brought us to a grand final in 2018. He brought us to a prelim in 2019. And now you're already writing him off, and he's got us into the finals despite 26 injuries. What would you say to those people?
Show me the flags. Show me the success. It doesn't matter what everyone else really does because it's about us. Now, look, I don't, and the thing is, I don't know enough about the inner machinations of Richmond and what they did to turn it around. Other than the fact that they sort of come up against two sort of sloppy opponents in a grand final, but they were worthy winners in both. They're certainly tracking in the right direction. It's a baffling list in terms of it's more of a list that's not got you've got some supreme player in Dusty there, but the rest of them just play well as a team. There's no individual superstars at that lower level. They just all function well, and you see that when they bring in a lot of new blood this year, that they all have a process and that they know that they're meant to follow, and they fit in well. It's like when we probably the last second half of Malthouse's coaching tenure, that you saw that a lot of players would come in and fill a void, but they knew what their role was and they played it well, but they're also supported around, I guess, by a well-structured side. So, and again, who was the other example you cited?
John Worsfold in his exit speech talked about the Bombers having to. He basically said, look, you can't take shortcuts. You need to stick the course. And people thought he was having a shot at them for their recruiting and shit. But then later he clarified, he used Richmond as an example, said, well, you look at, it was quite a while before they turned it around and became a powerhouse. So he was saying stick by Rudden and blah, blah, blah.
No, I didn't hear a word of any of his exit speech. I'd have to be interested in Essendon to do that.
Well, the one thing or two things with Essendon is originally when Hardwick first took over, he had some form of apprenticeship at some point under, what's his name, Clarkson, and he tried to play that Hawthorn style, and then they abandoned that and they played the style that they now play. And so instead of cannibalizing someone else's system, and this is the thing that, a number of people have criticised Buckley for, you got to design a system that suits your playing list. You go back to 2014, 2017, I think it's still the case now, is, if you're going to rely on elite kicking to pick your way surgically through congestion, and you need elite kicks. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a single elite kick in that side. I can think of some very good kicks, but the bulk of them, I'd be pretty worried about doing what to do, And there was a time against Port where, I forgot who took the mark on the wing, but he turned around, he passed it to Josh Thomas at between half forward and wing. And Thomas kicked to Mychek, who was running on the lead. And it was about a 20, 25-metre kick that all you had to do was put it up in the air and Mychek would have ran on and marked it. And the ball dropped 5 metres short of Mychek. So he went from controlling the ball and having a possible surgical entry into the forward 50 to creating a contested possession, which I believe we lost. And that's not to slam Josh Thomas, because they all fucking do it. They all all their skills let them down at some point. So this style, this over-possessing style, just doesn't seem right for the list that Buckley has. And the other thing I was going to say with Richmond is, as they've gone on, they've developed a lot of robbo about them. You look at Trent Koch, and he's become a mongrel as a captain. And I'm saying that as
That's a byproduct of success, though. You walk taller. Your chest is bigger.
Yeah, but I think they started doing that even before they won a flag. I think they, you look at Koch, and when he, I can't remember who he shouldered in the prelim that we saw against GWS, but, they all play with a bit more mongrel. So that's something we totally lack. And we talked about that previously. We just lack the robbo in our side. And that also communicates in other forms, such as leadership, and initiative. Again, it goes back to what I said before. When the game was there to be won, and even if you go back to the 2018 grand final, when the game was there to be won, who stood up and won it? Leanne Ryan, not one of our players. DeGoey tried, Mason Cox tried, but who else did it? There were instances, and I'll throw a few examples out, like where that last kick from Treloar, where he went forward and he kicked it straight to McGovern. Someone who was desperate to win that game wouldn't have went for a percentage kick in that case, I believe. I think as someone who was desperate to win, either would have put the afterburners on and tried to accelerate beyond the West Coast pressure that was coming at him, or would have stopped and propped and went to Grundy, who was just on the inside there, and he had spare man. But instead, he just sort of went for that percentage. I'll just kick it to the top of the centre square type kick. Chris took a mark on the wing, and instead of playing on and taking the game on, he went backwards to Langdon 50 metres. So there's a lot of examples in a lot of games for Collingwood when the game is there to be won. Who does it? Who stands up? And again, you go to like something that Sydney game. Who stood up in that game? It was Josh Dacos.
Yeah.
He took it on. And there was a nice little highlights package that came out with about Dacos today, about his 2020. And just watching his goals, I was thinking, geez, he actually kicks them at clutch times, which is great, So I think that side is fundamentally lacking key characteristics that it needs for success. And if they haven't cultivated them over Buckley's 9-year tenure, then they're not going to do it. So all this talk about we're not that far off, we almost won, and that big defence of we almost won a grand final, well, almost winning a grand final at Collingwood, that's
you don't pretty much too hard for that.
No, most of the coaches, they'll manage that. They'll manage to almost win a grand final. In fact, most of them will manage to almost win one or two. So we need more, and it's not coming from the systems we have in place and the personnel we have in place. We need more to bridge the gap between where we are, 8th, and get to the top. And the thing with, I was really muddled by a lot of the optimism coming out of Port hasn't beaten anyone and we can knock them off and all that sort of, and we have a lot to play for, which is, we want to avoid going to West Coast and all that sort of shit. Oh, we'll do it. And all that positivity that was coming out about, hey, it's all aligning for us to be motivated to win this, because the reality is this year, Port, Brisbane, Richmond, West Coast, they're all miles ahead of us.
Even the Cats, to a point.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing with the Cats, I'll say, is that we tend to match up well against them for whatever reason. So if we were going into a grand final or a prelim, I wouldn't be as worried about playing the Cats as I would some of the other teams who I think have the ability to blow us off the park. Whereas with the Cats, like I said, we tend to match up well and have these arm wrestles. But anyway, I mean, the teams above us, most of the teams above us really are playing so much better than us that I don't know where people are thinking who back Buckley and the people, the personnel who are in place. I don't know where they're thinking the improvement's going to come for us to bridge that gap.
It's probably not having injuries. That's always the good one.
Yeah, well, it's Collingwood. You've had 9 years of injuries, and you know what? It's probably going to keep happening.
There's a core of a really good side there, and you see it this year. You cited him before. Quainore's he's looking like he's going to be a very, very good footballer. Josh Dacos, you wrote off probably 18 times last year, but again, he's a massively a huge surprise packet this year. He's just exciting to watch, and you'd like to be excited by some of these kids and watch their development. I think part of the fun of going, not that it's always fun, but part of that going back through a rebuild cycle is you get invested in some of these young players, and you can see what skills that they have when they start coming to the surface and what they can add to the side moving forward. And that's an exciting time. At this moment, I just don't get a sense of this side being super exciting. It has its moments of flashy brilliance, and when it's on, but it's just far too many times it's just not on, and it's just dour to watch. There's obviously a number of things that have to change.
One thing I'd love to see is, and I know it's not going to happen under Buckley, but one of the things I think they really need to try is they need to experiment a lot more to fill some of these gaps that have been a result of poor recruiting and less cultivation. And in terms of experimenting, like I've said previously, I would be trying Scharenberg in the middle. I would definitely be pushing Maynard up there because he adds grunt and he's got a raking kick. I know De Goey is a fearsome forward, but we need the next generation of midfielders to be coming through. He's the best talent on the list that's going to fill that role. So he needs to be going forward, and they need to be finding another option up forward to replace him, which if it's not Cox, it's definitely not another ruck forward, and it might just be Stevenson for now. But what they have at the moment, the way they have the players placed, is I don't think you're getting the best out of them. And I think a midfield that features the Goey, Maynard, and Treloar and Adams is a lot more fearsome than the midfields that they are playing at the moment. And I actually believe that having guys like Maynard and De Goey in there, who are very physical players, will allow the Treloar to sit more on the outside and use his pace to break away, which is Sy is another one who, if he's fit, I would be playing him. I can only comment on what we know. As far as we know, there's no issues with him in the club. So if he's not being selected, that's perplexing.
Is he still broken?
No, I'm pretty sure he came back. So later when we talk about the final, I'd definitely be going for him. But there's a few guys I would really be going for to be in part of the engine room, because this much vaunted midfield is shit and it lacks chemistry together. So in football, I think the biggest key component is your midfield, because they're going to be around the ball the bulk of the time. So that's the first query that needs to be addressed. If you go back to someone like West Coast, who won the flag when it was 06, I think it was, they didn't have much of a recognised forward line in terms of, I think Quentin Lynch was their full forward. And then Embley would have been their centre-half forward, but it wasn't like a high-profile forward line as it is now. But they had an amazing midfield with Cousins and Judd and Kerr.
Yep.
So I actually think Collingwood that's the first place they need to address. And then they actually need to work out this bullshit with Grundy, with the taps. The way Grundy's playing now, I'll make a controversial call. The way he's playing now, if that's what you're going to get out of him because of what, no one knows what the hell's going on. Buckley has alluded, it's just a form slump. If that's what you're going to get out of him, I would seriously be trading him out and getting as many picks as you can back in to address the list rebuild that you need to perform. As Port Adelaide did, they got rid of some of their mid-age players and they brought in all these young guys, and now they've jumped to the ladder, top of the ladder. If they cannot work out this issue with Grundy, then I would just be saying, well, you know what? Whatever once in the generation talent he's got, Collingwood's not the place for him, because we just can't we can't exploit it. We can't find a way to benefit from it. So what's the point of having him there when playing just a okay ruckman will probably give you the same output?
Yeah, that's a strange one this year. Look, and to be fair, I think, and I see this in a little bit of Stevenson as well, the reality is that some of these guys, once you've taken them out of their day-to-day life bubble and they're going up into essentially being, how many months they've been there in hotels and stuff, which sounds wonderful, but I'm sure it's a bit of a chore when you're living the hub life, that some of them probably just psychologically just don't function well inside of there. And I think a lot of that can be reflective in the way that they're playing the game as well.
Well, the query with Grundy still, I mean, even when he was playing at his best, the communication between his tap work and the midfield is still not working.
Yeah, I'm not discounting that. I
can't believe you're discounting that.
I'm looking for reasons for why the slump. I mean, the guy knows how to play. He just needs to improve his tap work, as you said, and maybe after the last couple of weeks, revisit how he times his leap at the ball instead of going up a day earlier. But I think he's a very, very good player there, and
he's a very good player.
You just don't forget how to be that. There's got to be something else that's just, he just looks flat.
Oh, he looks extremely flat, and it might just be exhaustion and shit like that,
Well,
he has had an insane workload.
You would have rested him, wouldn't you, at some point in the year? Wouldn't that have been logical?
You would have. That period where they played 4 games in 14 days, there were 2 games I would just not have played him, simply as a rest. And that Melbourne one, which we've commented on when Gawn didn't play, that would have been top of that list. But we didn't do it, and whether we've run him into the ground or whatever, I don't know. But, it really is baffling how far he's fallen from grace. And in terms of Collingwood's list, like I hear conversation about where do we go with this side and who could we trade out that's worth something. And in my opinion, the only two players who are genuinely worth something are Grundy and De Goey.
And
I mean, like,
and Josh.
Oh, Josh is getting there. But when I talk about guys who are worth something, I'm not talking about people talk about, well, what if you traded Treloar? I think you'd get a pick in the teens for Treloar, just one. If you traded Sidebottom, I think you get a pick in the 20s for Sidebottom.
Let's do it.
In Stevenson, at the moment, you get a pick in the teens. I'm not advocating that we trade in these guys. I'm just looking at what you get. But then if you look at someone like De Goey or Grundy, I think, hey, those are the guys you're really going to get, quite a bit back from, because everybody knows they're going to be. Oh, and sorry, the other one's Darcy Moore, of course.
I was gonna just say that one, apart from being facetious about Josh, even though he is looking like $1 million. But yeah, definitely Darcy.
And they're the guys that are going to get you 2 first-round picks, so at least. So if you're going to rebuild and said we've got holes in it, who would you get rid of? Of those 3 players, Grundy would be my choice if you were deciding you needed to sacrifice something to rebuild.
Are you asking that as a question, or are you just stating
that? Yeah, I'm asking that as a question now.
Oh, look, out of the 3, I think, definitely Grundy is the most expendable with high currency. But ultimately, I don't want to see any of them go at that level. I think that's, if you've got the building blocks there, those guys are your foundations moving forward. Even though you loathe Grundy with a passion, I still think I've seen enough to know that there's a good player there.
Yeah, I think there's a great player there. Just, I'm really frustrated, and as I've always said, the tap work thing, I don't exclusively blame Grundy. There's a number of people responsible for that not working, which includes the midfielders and the coaching staff. And the coaching staff ultimately is responsible because they're the one who sends them out with whatever directive it is. And it hasn't worked for 2.5 years, and people will say, oh, well, Grundy's still getting whatever, this many taps to advantage. It's like, but he gets his hand to so many taps that, we should be doing a lot better. And this whole thing, one of the defenses, well, the midfield's not good enough to capitalize on this tap work. It's like, do you realize how rucking works? Rucking works by tapping it to your midfielder, whether that midfielder is Matt Rowell or Tom Phillips. So you need to work out a way to benefit from that tap work dominance, which we just haven't done for 2.5 years, which is another reason I think, hey, you got to make changes.
Yeah, no, totally agree.
Any final thoughts about this terrible game?
To their credit, I think we quietly expected them to get blown away. I know you were cheering for it in the third quarter, that you put on your grey Port jumper with prison bar hat and everything. You were going gangbusters. But I think in some respects, it was admirable that they managed to keep that gap closed. But whether you lose at this stage of the year by a point or 100 points, it probably really doesn't matter. It's still a loss. And it was still something that you needed to win to give you some better sense of advantage in the finals next week or the week after, or whatever it is that they're being played. And that didn't happen.
And, as I said, I think that scoreline flattered them. I think Port was always in control. They played tempo football. Whenever we challenged them, they lifted a little bit and just held us at bay. And I think they did just enough to win. I don't think that the 3-goal margin is commensurate with what the difference is in terms of the two sides. I think it could have been a lot worse. Anyway.
Well, we're either close to them or we're really far away.
Well, have some things. Media Mephitic. You interested?
That'd be good. Like change of pace.
Yeah, change of pace. So just a whole list of
Robbos.
odds and ends from all around. Someone actually, no, I better not say that. This is from all around the league because I'm curious about your perspective. Carlton Football Club chaired off Bryce Gibbs in their last game against the Crows. Gibbs is a Crow. What do you think? Do you think that's okay?
I think that's fine. I mean, you've got to look at this as, he's worked and played. Longer at Carlton than he did
I was on at Adelaide for 2 years.
at the Crows. So you've got a lot of history with those guys,
3 years.
and I think that's just a reasonably good show of respect. I have no issue with that whatsoever. I didn't mind it.
I disagree. I think the Carlton player should have dismembered him and eaten him. And that they didn't is just weak. It shows what that culture's become at that place where they count. They're no longer cannibals. They don't eat their own. This disgusts me. Last week, Quaynor got the Rising Star nomination. Speaking of Adelaide, is he still captain? I don't know. Tex Walker tweeted it was an absolute joke that a bloke named Lachlan Scholl was overlooked.
Yeah, Shoal had a really good game, but that's just not how the Rising Star works. You don't get the nom that week for one good game. It is about rewarding consistency, I believe, and that's the criteria that's been on display for quite a while. And I guess if Tex hasn't bothered to read it, then Shoal will get his gong another time. I think he still qualifies next year. So he'll get a nod then. I mean, really, at the end of the day, Shoal's not going to win it this year, so does it matter?
Adelaide's probably looking for any victories they can, muster from anywhere.
And Shoal looks, he looks quite good, and kudos to him for putting in a good performance. But that's just not the way that the Rising Star works. And Quaynor's long overdue for a nod on it too. So. He got his time in the sun, and we'll move on. Quaynor's not going to win it, so at the end of the day, what does it mean? At least it's recognition.
It's recognition, but I mean, what's it mean? Ultimately, it's nothing.
No,
I was remiss, actually, in congratulating Scott Pendlebury on becoming the record games holder at Collingwood for 114 games. Champion, the only two people I know who wrote him off were Mike Sheen and Spook a few years ago. Well done, Pendles.
Yeah, no, congratulations.
Where do you rate him in the pantheon of Collingwood stars that you've seen?
He'd be top 5.
Who's the other 4 then?
Well, there's obviously you, and then I just got in there as well for our performance on Vic Park on 2002 Grand Final Eve. Rock would be up there for mine. Bucks would be up there for mine. I think, if you're looking like to like, he's probably a little bit just behind Bucks, but he's still exceptionally good. What about you?
In my top 5, or where's he sit?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's really hard comparing players. Hard comparing, like...
From era to era, it gets difficult.
Yeah. But it's also, when you have conversations about who's the best and all that, it's like you can't compare forwards to midfielders. And as you just said, the era to era, it really changes. Pendlebury, I think one of the problems, or not problems, but I think that little rebuild we did from 14 to 17 pissed away some of his, not potential, but, his excellence. We just wasted it on shit listless performances and sides that didn't capitalise on it. But I guess that's that's one of the credos of Collingwood. Nathan Buckley mentioned in the radio interview that Pendle said at some point he would like to play without the burden of captaincy.
Oh, we can do that next year.
Well, he's 32, so I guess they're waiting until he's, 42 or something.
Well, when Bucks stops being coach.
He won't stop then. Caroline Wilson on Footy Classified said she was at a private function and heard 2 former Magpie stars querying Pendle's calibre as a captain.
Who were they, Caro? What were their names?
She was pushed on it, and then she said it wouldn't be fair to comment because it was a private function.
But you can name that you're at a function that involved Collingwood players, and 2 former stars said this, but you can't actually qualify it with any facts.
Well, I was at a newspaper function late last year when we could still go out, and 2 former journalists said they questioned her credibility.
Really? I believe that.
Yeah, well, you don't want to ask who they were.
No, I'm not interested.
She then cannibalised the statement. It was almost like a grand indictment on Pendlebury. It's pretty sickening to watch. I sent you an article earlier in the week about, or maybe you sent to me, I don't know. Mason Cox, he had a detached retina. His other eyeball rolled out of the eye socket. They spent weeks looking for it before they put it back in. It was really pretty gruesome injury that he went through, or injuries that he's gone through. That's just sort of interesting, I think, and I think this will probably happen with Jaden Stevenson in the off season. While people are critical of players, you really don't know the shit that they're going through. Cox has had blindness in one eye when you're still trying to play, and difficulty dealing with the lights and all that sort of stuff. And it explains some of his early season modest form.
Yeah, look, I've no doubt it was you who found that article and sent it on, but it's not in the same anywhere near ballpark. But years ago, my one of my kids got me with a beautiful uppercut from the crib and scratched my cornea. And I tell you, it's probably the most painful thing I've ever been through in my
What
life.
about the 218 grand final?
Well, the second most painful thing I've ever been through in my
What about the
life.
203 grand final?
Well, actually, it's probably about the 12th most painful thing I've ever endured. But the interesting thing you notice is when you, because I had to have it treated and stuff and covered the eye for quite a while, it's just how quickly your vision perception changes and your sensitivity to light. Because he talked about in that article too about the lights at the MCG were giving him grief and all that sort of thing. And you know, that's exactly what it goes through. And it actually takes a while for you. That even once you expose the other eyeball back to reality, it takes a while for everything to get to gel to get back in there. Clearly, you know, because I'm some sort of Krypton refugee, that I was back up and running within about 6 months. But his was worse, and it was both eyes and stuff. It must have been a horrendous road to get back from.
Yeah, again, it just sort of shows that, you know, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So,
Well, at the
as I
time, neither did he.
said, well, as I said, I mean, I think there'll be something similar about Stevenson that'll come out that will find that his glandular is a lot worse than we
Oh, I
realise.
have no doubt about that one. I
Yeah,
think they knew something was up with Cox when he started training with Carlton for a couple of weeks.
you know, when he's trained with Carlton, he improved two teams.
I guess when you've got a heightened sense of smell, you probably can smell where the shit's coming from.
Yeah. I found this really interesting. Still, Sidebottom was going to try everything he could to make it back, and about 2 hours later, that was it.
Well, he tried.
Someone said to me at a private function, and I don't want to name who it was, but someone said to me that Collingwood, you know, saying we're going to try everything we can to get him back was just a cosmetic effort to satisfy the masses. You that cynical? You believe that was?
Oh, jeez. I think if you're going to take that tack, you'd roll it out for a couple of days, wouldn't you? You wouldn't just say, well, look at that, we won Tats Lotto, and then an hour later it goes, oh, actually, that was last week's ticket. No, I don't. I think they probably made some sort of grandiose hope that was going to happen, but then the logistics of... Well, I got actually two things. I think I talked to you about this. Is that this is all predicated on the fact that we lost and we were going to WA, made him quarantining and getting into those hubs almost impossible, because there was talk of him going up and quarantining in Northern Territory or something like that. But I would have thought they would have hedged their bets that even if they did roll over against Port and had to go to Perth, that you'd still hedge your bets that maybe if you won there and you're still in it, there's that following week. And he would have, and they, I think from next week onwards, are they, or the next round of finals onwards, aren't they all playing in Queensland?
Yeah.
Towards the end. So wouldn't he have just gone up to Queensland with his wife and bub now and then just stayed there? And if they got it wrong, they get a holiday. I don't know. I would have thought it would have been options there.
Yeah,
But
I think the problem is because you have the baby who's, you know, what, 1 week old or whatever she is.
I mean, that in itself would be difficult to do because you've got no support structure around you. If you're doing that with family or anything, I don't know what their home situation's like. Maybe she's moved in with the folks and stuff, and you stuck to them, you've got options there, and you've weighed it up and thought, well, it's just too hard because you'd have no one up there to pitch in.
Well, I think that would be the problem. I think it'd be like if there was no baby involved, they might go down and just, well, if finals don't work out, they don't work out. We've had a 2-week holiday, but because you now got a baby and you're moving into hubs and all that. And side bottom would also, I imagine, actually probably the partner too, when they're living in hubs, they're getting tested extensively and all that. It probably would have just been such a logistical clusterfuck that they would have thought, nah, screw it.
Well, I guess the other thing too is if you go up there and they crash and burn, and you want to come back home, you've got to come back home and isolate again. You cut yourself off from whatever support structure you've got. But again, not knowing the home situation, I can imagine there must have been a number of variables there that sort of just made them say no in the end. And I think most people would have respected that decision right from the outset. If you've gone home and said, look, it's no fucking chance of me coming back, you blokes are on your own, you bunch of knobs, that would have been enough.
Yeah, well, in the end, typical Collingwood. I just blame for everything. Tom Langdon's retirement seems imminent with a bad knee problem.
Yeah, so was it Bucks' presser during the week? It sounded fairly ominous there that he's got a decision to make. And I think it's a question of, do you go under the knife? Do you go through another year of recovery and see no improvement? Or do you just say that that's it, I'm done? There's plenty of blokes before him that have had to go through the same sorts of decision-making.
Yeah, well, I'm sure his story hasn't played out in regards to why that knee is so fucked up. So I think he's gone, unfortunately, which is a horrible, for any player to lose their career when they should be in their prime.
Yep.
So that's unfortunate. Sorry, Tom. Josh Date got selected in the under-22 side.
He'd be captain, wouldn't he? Captain coach?
Should be.
I think so. Was he in there 22 times? Who else is in there?
Should be. I don't know. I didn't look that closely. I don't care that much. But all done to Josh Dacos because he's probably one of the few players this year where you've looked at and thought, you have improved. You bring us excitement and you give us hope for the future.
Correct.
Someone I spoke to today said, geez, if he's this good and the young one's meant to be better, how good's he? So that's at least one positive for Collingwood. But then again, the talk about around the father-son and all that, they'll probably outlaw it by the time Josh is going to come to Collingwood. So
it's good that we're trying to collect the set of them, though.
Oh, well, we haven't always done it with father sons, but we've done it most of the time. We got all the Cloaks, we got the Shaws. We only got one of the Kellys, and we didn't get any Stewarts.
Oh.
Eddie Maguire partied on the Gold Coast.
Where do you start? Look. My understanding is everything he's done is was above board or was legitimate or whatever. I seriously don't buy the research.
He was researching venues apparently or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of criminals out there that cite that as an excuse and it never works. Not that I'm saying he's a criminal, but the old research excuse is a blinder. No, look, I think if you're in that position where you're a media commentator and you've potted quite a few players and stuff over the last few months, I don't think it was a wise move to put yourself in the same position. Let's presume that maybe there was someone there with a camera phone who was always going to take a photo of you, and you should know that by now. And even with all the best and honourable and correct intentions, it was always going to be framed differently. So I wouldn't have probably thought it was a good thing. Harmless, but I just, don't think it was.
Well, that's that sort of thing that put you in that position to be condemned. I actually wish, Eddie Maguire, we've sort of spoken about his presidency and whether it's time for a change and all that sort of stuff. I would definitely keep him on, though, if he just adopted a pro wrestling personality. And when he was caught, he should just come out and say something like, I'm the president of Collingwood. I can do what the fuck I want.
He should walk around with a cane
heavyweight
and a cape.
He should walk around with a title belt over his shoulder.
Be like fabulous Freddie Blassie.
Yeah, he dye his hair blonde. Dye
fabulous.
your hair blonde, Eddie. You know, like you don't. Yeah, dye it blonde. Be like Crisp and all those guys who dyed it blonde.
Yeah.
You know, and just walk around in wrestling trunks. Don't even
So
worry about the suit anymore.
he could go down to games in the cheer squad like that South Melbourne geriatric and just sit there and just rev up the crowd and stuff, and then maybe other opposition players could just run down the stairs and throw him onto the pitch or something and smash a chair on his head. I mean, no one's going to
Ah,
not do anything other than applaud, and it's entertainment.
well, you should do
Maybe
things
he should
like.
do some research on this.
Well, you know, he should have
He loves the
like
research. I mean, I often
he.
see him walking around with an armful of encyclopedias. He loves it.
Well, against West Coast in 2 weeks, he should just, when all the umpires are not looking, he should just run out and hit Josh Kennedy in the head with a chair and
Yep.
just run back out
And just look
and
innocent. I mean, what? Who,
just look
me?
innocent. Yeah, yeah. You know, and Kennedy, Roughhead should just be looking around going, I don't know what happened. Or, you know, Roughhead might just be rubbing his eyes at the time. Oh, sorry, I had like a fly in my eye. I didn't see any of it. It's the perfect way to market Collingwood, I
No,
think.
and to tell you what, drop this bloody good old Collingwood Forever song and play the national anthem of Russia and Iran, and we'll all get up there and salute.
Oh, I'll
Let's
definitely
bring
do
back
that.
some old school entertainment. No, so I agree. I think Eddie should resign and take up that position. I think it's the best thing you've ever said.
Oh, well, it's always the first time. Finally, on the Media Mephitic, and this is on a serious note, with all the heartbreak and pain, and you know, we're just talking about Eddie, and he says things, and then things go wrong, and all the verbal gaffes and all that sort of shit. Do you think there's a possibility that Collingwood is just trolling the football public?
Yeah.
Do you think like the whole team's just sitting there in their hub now after they lost to Port Adelaide and reading the message boards and going, look what he said. He said you're shit, mate.
Well, there's probably nothing on Netflix left to watch, so you could be onto something there.
So we're going into a final against West Coast in 2 weeks. Any
Sat-
changes?
Saturday week. You'd have to seriously look at Varks and JT, would you?
Yeah, I don't think if
I
they
think,
haven't dropped JT by now, I don't think they will. But
and the hits just keep on coming.
I don't know who they'd actually replace him with because they don't really, unless you go to someone like it to, sorry, I'm not going to pronounce his surname, but he'd be the only small forward option, I'd think, unless they went for something taller with Rusco. If he's fit,
surely, if you've got someone that's going to be a non-contributor, you don't want to take him into a final, do you?
If you watch Collingwood grand finals,
Well, I mean, I'm trying to be realistic here. But
I
surely
would.
you can take
I
a
wouldn't.
chance on. You've got to look at, I guess, from the view of you could put anybody into that position, and are they going to do a worse job?
No. Look, to be honest, going back 8 weeks or whatever, when things were starting to look a little bit ominous, and then you're going into force changes anyway. I'm actually really surprised they didn't try Rantel and Bianco, and they haven't gone back to Scharenberg and these sort of guys. I would have thought they would have
What about
experimented a
Murphy?
lot more. Murphy, definitely. They should have rebuilt him as Robocop. But I just look at it from the point of view, look, Varco's not going to be there next year, so I don't know why you're putting games into him. If he was playing really well, yeah, fine, but he's not. And if he was playing really well, then you'd probably carry him into next year. But he's really, really struggling. He looks like the game's gone past him. Josh Thomas, I don't know what his stats are for this year. I'll look it up, play some Think music. But
Have you done it yet?
yeah, internet's slow. In this hub.
Oh, I'll come back and
So
I'll edit this bit out. If you want to call anyone, go for it.
so this year he's averaged 4.9 kicks and 5.5 handballs for 10.4 disposals a game.
How many goals he
And
kicked?
he's kicked 4 goals from 12 games.
Are you serious? Is that all?
4 goals, 4.
Fuck.
And 4 goal assists.
Oh, I mean, I guess his biggest problem moving forward is, do you wear the Brownlow over the left nipple or the right nipple?
I think his biggest problem moving forward is moving forward. He's played 12 games, so he's averaged 5 kicks, 5 handballs, 2 marks, point 0.3 points a game, point three goal assists. Now, if you were going to look at it from the point of view, he's in there as defensive forward, he's only gotten 27 tackles, so he's only averaging 2 tackles, a game. So I don't know why he's still in there. It's a baffling sort of choice. And yeah, you're right. You can put anyone in that role and they're probably going to give you the same return. Comparing him to, I'll compare him to Tip and Woody from Essendon, because I think Tip and Woody is still like a relatively average offensive player. He kicks some nice goals, but looking at Tip and Woody, he's played...
he smacks us around, though. He loves that.
Yeah. So he's only averaging 5 kicks also. He's only averaging 3.5 handballs. So he's actually averaging less disposals than Josh Thomas. But he's kicked 19 goals and he's had 57 tackles. Mm-hmm. So, playing as a defensive forward, he's actually, and we saw that against Collingwood, he really applied pressure. So I don't know why they're persevering with Josh Thomas. I was going to say before, the guy, if he's fit, if he's playing those scratch matches, the guy I'd bring in would be Sire. I think he's integral to that midfield success.
Yeah, I'd be happy to see him come back.
And it's the sort of thing of like, as I've said before, what you're doing is not working. So it's probably a time that you tried a few different things. And Sire is one of those guys, I think, you slot him in, or Wills if you played a really good game. If you slot him in, a lot of those midfielders around them fall into place and suddenly become a lot more effective. So he'd be the one I'd definitely bring back. I don't think they've really got any other options. Tom Phillips will probably be fit by then. He had a hamstring, but I wouldn't be bringing him back.
No. What about
Murphy?
No, Tyler Brown. Do you think he'll hold on?
Yeah, I think he'll hold on. I think he's struggling too, but Callum Brown's the other alternative who they might bring back. But look, Callum and Tyler are both struggling. Tyler, you sort of expect it because he's really first year in the system, in the AFL system. Callum's really gone backwards quite a bit in the last 2 years. I don't think they've done him any favours by persevering with him when they should have actually probably dropped him and given him a spell. But, there's a few guys that I could seriously drop from that side. So Varco and Thomas is where it begins. I'd definitely bring in Sire if he's fit. I'd even bring in Wills for Thomas. You're not having to replace that much input from those guys. So if Wills comes in and plays a half forward and only gets 6 kicks, well, that's what you're getting from Thomas also, but you're probably going to get a lot more tackling.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's probably all for nothing because I'm pretty sure the West Coast will smash the crap out of us.
Yeah, there is that slight little issue because I think they got Kennedy, McGovern, and one other. I can't remember who it is, but they're under injury clouds. But there was something I read today to say that they're more than likely going to be fit by then, which you'd probably expect them because it's elimination final. I guess they're going to roll the dice and play them.
Well, they rolled it in the grand final. McGovern had 19 collapsed ribs and played the game of his life. So
look, I don't have much hope for us beating them over there.
No doubt.
They'll no doubt open the floodgates to the crowd too. So there'll be 50,000 Eagles supporters there and Driver.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a horrible atmosphere.
Yeah, just as an aside, just looking up Wills, he's played 8 games. He's got 38 tackles. So, if you're not going to get offense out of Josh Thomas, I'd even roll the dice and play Wills.
He's fit, isn't he? He didn't.
Yeah.
He was dropped. Yeah, I don't remember him being injured. So, yeah, he's fit.
No.
Yeah. But again, we don't get any really sort of sense of any performances in these scratch matches. So,
no.
They could all be running around like headless chickens for all we know. I mean, Christ, I think you've got players from other sides playing in scratch matches just to make up numbers inside of these hubs. It's not ideal, I guess, for preparation.
No, but I'm just looking at it purely from, hey, you could play one of us instead of Josh Thomas, and you're going to get the same return at this point. So similarly, Varco. So hey, why not spend that game time on a different option, and maybe something new, something exciting will actually happen rather than just us seeing the same old shit again.
Yep.
Your tip?
West Coast by 10 goals.
I tip Collingwood by minus 37 points.
It sounds like you're close to your assessment, but far away at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I've improved 2 tips by saying that. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
No. Look, as much as I don't want to see him get smashed, if that happens, surely it's got to be a wake-up call and they go away in the off-season and have a bloody good, long, hard look at themselves and make some decisions.
I think it's going to be an interesting game just in how does Collingwood tackle it,
Or tackling it would be good.
but it's one of those sort of situations where I think sometimes clubs going into state to play this sort of final against West Coast they give up before they even get there, and it just becomes like a bit of a nothing game. So mentally, it'll be interesting to see what Collingwood look like when they show up. The one thing which I said last week anyway is we lost. Sorry, we had a lot of people sort of going, we need to avoid a loss to Port because then we don't want to go to Perth. And it's just like, you know what? I think Hawthorn went to Perth twice during their free-peat. The reality is, if you're going to be a good team, you get whatever you need done. You don't make up excuses. You don't look for shortcuts or any of that sort of shit. You just go out and do it. So I'm just really curious about Collingwood psychology going into this game.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, look, we've had some remarkable wins over there in the past and in finals as well. You wouldn't put anything past them. I just don't. The malaise has been there for a couple of months, apart from a few spirited performances. I just don't see that we are anywhere near them, or yet at the same time far away. So I don't think what we've got in terms of the way that we're playing is good enough to win.
Yeah, well, I think the other thing to look at is, again, when we keep talking about system being an issue, and it doesn't really matter who the personnel is because the system isn't working. So you got to have terrible players in there or great players in there. If you still have that disconnect moving the ball, who gives a fuck?
Yeah.
So,
and I don't see Grundy getting better against Nick Nat.
Well, he seems to have he seems to be almost phobic when he plays Nick Nat. It's probably the sort of game. So, again, I wish Buckley was a little bit lateral. If I was going into this game as coach, I'd start Grundy at full forward. I'd play Mason Cox in the ruck and let him, and just say to him, run into him for 10 minutes, make him jump over you, tire him out, bang him up a little, and then we'll bring Grundy in when Nick Nat's been softened a little bit, and let's see how we go.
We won't, though.
Oh, naturally we won't, because we'll just do what the hell, we always do.
Be predictable.
Anyway, that is it from us. We'll talk to you after the final.
Yay, Bo.
Later.
See ya.